You and I have driven many Kia Stingers with two different engines and have learned over the past couple of years, these are magnificent. However, this is not an ordinary Kia Stinger. This is special. They call it a GTS, and there's some confusion surrounding that, specifically in this area here. So right now I'm in comfort mode. I go into sport mode. It confirms it over there. However, a couple more steps. We hit this button here, turns off traction control, but I hit it again and hold it for 3 seconds. And we wait, and now traction control and stability control are switched off. And this is where most people are thinking this is a less powerful, less than half the price M5 or E63 in that it's an all-wheel drive car, but you can switch off the torque to the front wheels completely. That is not entirely the case. That's the confusion, and that's what we're going to focus on today. Now, before you and I get too far down the road, what makes a Stinger a GTS? Well, there are a raft of changes, and the ones we're most interested in are a combination of mechanical as well as programming. One that probably stands out the most is on the all-wheel drive derivations of Stinger GTSs, they're now fitted with a mechanical limited slip differential. Then to accompany that, there are programming changes to the control logic with everything having to do with the stability and traction systems. And what that translates to is the ability to send more torque to the rear wheels. First things first, this is the same wonderful 3.3 twin-turbo V6, 365 horsepower, 376 pounds. The torque comes in real low. Aside from that, if I'm completely honest here, I cannot tell a huge amount of difference with less amount of torque going to the front wheels. And for the avoidance of doubt, if we were to back off and go into comfort mode here, 60% of the torque now to the back. If I were to go into regular sport mode and I'm still got the traction off, I've got 80% going to the rear. However, in this drift mode, it's up to 100%. Now there's an asterisk there. How do you get to that 100%? Well, this is an unusual thing. It's not a button you switch in order to get it into 100% to the rear wheels. It's how your input of the wheel is changed. So if you're a drifter, what you would have to do is do a feint. So a hard cut to the right or the left of the wheel, and that tells the car, hey man, we want to drift. And it sends 100% of the torque to the rear wheels. Up until this point, I've kind of sandbagged you because all we've discussed is an all-wheel drive Stinger, which this is. However, if you know Stingers, you know there is a rear-wheel drive option on offer, which begs the question, is there such a thing as a GTS rear-wheel drive Stinger? And the answer to that is yes. Now that's where we get into some more confusion, because why would changes in the programming of the traction and stability control system have anything to do with a car that already has 100% of the torque going to the rear wheels? And then on top of that, Stingers that are rear-wheel drive from the factory, at least GTs, have a mechanical limited slip differential already fitted as standard. So what are the changes? Well, in a rear-wheel drive Stinger, it's mainly appearance, and those are the same changes, at least in appearance, on the all-wheel drive, which you can see here. The biggest, by far, is the Federation Orange. Obviously, someone at Kia is a Star Wars fan. Then there's carbon fiber trim, and I'd like to note it's real carbon fiber. You can see it around the grille surround here, the mirror fairings, as well as the side vents. Then there's one more change, which I spent a lot of time looking at this. There's a little S badge on the back. And clearly it's not the same badge as the GT, which tells me it's not, or at least hasn't been done at the same time. So I did a bit of digging. It turns out that badge is from a Stinger in the UK, a GTS that existed there. So Kia North America got the badges from the UK, and that badge is put on the car at the port. So it's not just the tune to the all-wheel drive system and the traction control system, as well as some of the appearance on the outside. There are two major changes, actually three major changes on the inside. The biggest being a suede steering wheel, well, they call it Alcantara, and that's the supplier, by the way. Alcantara on the center console, and then you would think this is Alcantara. It's not. They call it Shamood, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. What it is, it's like a faux suede headliner, and the combination of all this really does a lot to elevate the build quality of the inside of these things. With that, an open letter to the color and trim people, either in the design studio in Irvine or in Korea, this really is a glorious change. The car deserved it. Frankly, I think it needed it. However, how about spending an additional maybe $100, $200, whatever it is, to improve the quality of the plastics on the top of the dash, top of the doors, maybe in other parts of the car? That would nicely complement details like this. Yes, it is indeed that time again to play your favorite game of mine, the options game, with today's contestant, something we have not featured in a round of the game in a very long time, a Kia Stinger. And this one is special for all the reasons we've already discussed, as well as two others. Number one, they only made these in the 2019 model year. And number two, they only made 800. So the car you were looking at is a limited edition. And then on top of that, it only came in any color you want, as long as it's that obnoxious orange, for a base price of $46,400. Now, I'd like to point out, if it were a two-wheel drive, meaning rear-wheel drive, it would be $2,000 cheaper. Now, you and I know about a Stinger, different levels. This isn't the most loaded Stinger you can have. There was a Stinger GT, which is about $39,000. Then there's a GT1 and a GT2. This sits between a GT and a GT1. However, they add into the GTS package a couple of standalone options fitted as standard, namely the panoramic sunroof, thank you very much, the Qi wireless charger, as well as the Harman Kardon sound system. Now, this car has two options fitted to it. This cargo mat, which is $125, and then the floor mats, which somehow are all-wheel drive specific. I don't know how, but they are $150, and you're charging me $150 for floor mats on an almost $50,000 car. Can we rethink that? Destination handling, $995 for a total suggested retail price of $47,670. That X5M competition that we recently drove had a very similar type system where you could take some torque away from the front of the car. There you could tell the difference in the steering. You could tell it was more of a two-wheel drive car, even though it was all-wheel drive. Here, you really can't tell the difference. The only thing I would say here is perhaps an open letter to Albert Bierman now. Albert, this car, you did a magnificent job. I would own one of these. However, since you and I have driven the last Stinger, I have driven not one, but two G70s, one 4-cylinder, one 6-cylinder like this. And that car, the setup of the suspension, I would argue, is better there, even though it's the same platform car. Can we take the calibration of that, perhaps maybe even a level above that, and make this a stiffer, or at least a version that is stiffer? Because that's the only thing holding this car back in terms of performance. It's really good, but to that next level, if we could just have a stiffer suspension, really focused on the ass end of the car, because that's where you feel it, because you got that weight with all that extra metal over the back, because it's a hatchback. The other one is a sedan. So if you could do that, that would be wunderbar. Vielen Dank. Net, I wouldn't go so far as to classifying this a more than 50% discount of a less powerful E63 or M5. Rather, the big win here is this. A very large car manufacturer, Hyundai Kia Group, has now demonstrated multiple times that they can do a limited run of a serial production enthusiast car. Notice I say this is not the first time. Back when they were first showing the car in late 2017, they were trotting this yellow model around to all the media events, and everybody's like, oh my God, we want the yellow car, we gotta have the yellow car. So they did a limited run of 400 cars, and the reason why they came up with the number 400, that is the minimum order the factory can do with one color. So like, we need to do this again. So they came up with a GTS and made it even better. Well, they were going to do it again with something called the Atlantic. And that car, that was a fancy GT2. So everything in it and then some. And that's finished in this stunning, like midnight blue color with saddle leather seats and I believe different wheels. The car really stood out. And that also introduced the old Oldsmobile Aurora trick. Remember that car? Where it didn't say Oldsmobile anywhere on the car, only Aurora. This, at least the back of the car, that took the Kia badge off and it just says Stinger, and obviously this was the beneficiary as well. Well, FCA, they took interest in that and like, hey man, we got concept cars called the Atlantic, you can't use that name. So Kia being Kia, I'm like, okay, no problem. So they didn't scrap the car, they scrapped the name, and now for the 2020 model year, they're doing something called the Indigo, which is the car I just described. They're gonna do 500 of those, And then that's going to benefit from all the GTS changes, so that's going to have the mechanical limited slip diff, as well as the programming changes in a fancier car with a much nicer color. And really, this takes me back, and I don't want to harp on FCA here, but it takes me back to like muscle cars of the late 60s and early 70s, where they had these limited edition cars, like one of 50, one of like 500, which are now bringing a lot of money at collector car auctions. Am I saying that this is going to be at like Barrett-Jackson in 2070 and get like 5 times the return on your money? Probably not, but at least you got some bragging rights.